Welcome to Grid Talk. My name is George Housen, and today we are here to review the 2025 British Grand Prix. Joining me today, we have Grid Talk's very own Owain Medford
Hello.
and Ruby Price
Hello.
and sports journalist Dev Tiagi.
Hey guys, good to be here.
Good to have you back, Dev. So, yeah, plenty to talk about from this race. A lot of different topics. We'll try our best to cover them. There's so much going on, so many different stories up and down the grid. The bad, the good, and the ugly of Formula One definitely got showcased today. But we'll start with the race winner today. A bit of a redemption arc in a sense for Lando Norris. Of course, he led briefly at the start of 23. He probably should have won the race last year if it wasn't for a combination of him not doing the best pit stop and also not the best strategy. But Lando Norris definitely a huge win from today, winning his first time around Silverstone, and also really important for his championship hopes as well, Owain.
Yeah, obviously he now brings him within, if I just check my notes, 8 points of Piastri, which is, just over a race win over his teammate. But yeah, he's closing down the gap and he's, only, sort of 2 weeks away. And he seems to be on a bit of a roll, obviously, he had a great run out in Austria, but also now he's, having a great time here as well. And it's always going to be special when you win your first your first home Grand Prix. It's the one that all the drivers will want to win, bar Monaco. And because of that, he didn't do anything wrong, which I think is the biggest. Which is the biggest thing to obviously to win in the Grand Prix, particularly when you've got a fast car and it ends up being between you and your teammate. There were times where he put his foot down, but it didn't matter because Norris had enough to keep it. Didn't go off the track, didn't mess up, didn't make any mistakes, didn't do a safety car infringement that was on the verge of legal, depending on which way you see it. And that was it really. That was all you needed to do. He obviously started in third, but he just pulled out a great race to take the win and obviously close that gap and bring home his like I say, it's his first home win and he'll be ecstatic about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those that didn't actually watch the race, it was a wet, dry, constantly changing race. The British summertime weather was absolutely out on force in this one. And pretty much everybody at some point ran off the track. Some people, of course, continued, some people did not. But as far as I could tell, Lando Norris was one of the very few guys to keep his nose clean. So we'll talk about obviously the the incident behind the safety car for Piastri, the penalty with that. But from just Lando Norris's point of view, Ruby, this is huge for him. Like Owain said, it's just over a difference between a victory and second place between him and Oscar Piastri now, just 8 points between the two of them. Got a 3 week break now, headed into his sort of second home race in Belgium. I think his mum's Belgian or something like that. So he's going to be riding the crest of confidence really coming into this one.
Yeah, it's certainly making those of us who wrote off Lando Norris's title chances earlier in the season look a little bit foolish, if you're being totally upfront and honest about it, because, we spent the whole of last season really talking about whether Lando Norris could hunt down Max Verstappen, obviously not in equal machinery and over much like there was a bigger gap at the front and all of that stuff. But Lando has really turned the wick up, particularly post Canada. It would have been very easy for him to just enter one of those Sebastian Vettel 2017-18-esque spirals. But that's not what he's done. He's taken the hit, he's taken the responsibility for it as well. He went into Austria full of confidence, saying, "Yep, we've moved on from this. Now I've just got to go and put it back on the track." And he's gone into his home race weekend with all of the talk being about, Max Verstappen and where he might end up and, whether Oscar Piastri is going to upset the home fans. But, Lando Norris, he's got three Lando stands. And I think really, the home advantage is just shown because, as Owain said, he kept it clean and he's finished P1, and that's all he needed to do this weekend. And, going into Belgium, he's done well there in the past. He'll be hoping that the weather's not, atrocious because he's also got a history there in that regard. But yeah, a fantastic weekend for Lando Norris as he gets closer to his title rival.
Yeah, it gets tighter and tighter, does that title battle between the two of them. I mean, I can't remember who said it. A good friend of mine said, Lando Norris after Canada really needs to see like a sports psychologist or a psychologist or someone just to kind of, look at his approach to things and see how he approaches. I mean, and if he has done that, it's worked because he's got two wins in a row. First time he's managed that this season, believe it or not, as well. He's getting a real streak going at the moment with that. But yeah, I mean, he largely did win the race, though. Let's be honest here. I mean, he did keep his nose clean, of course, which was very difficult to do. But he largely won the race because of a penalty to Oscar Piastri. Now, when I first saw this, Dev, I was absolutely shocked that it was a 10-second penalty for this. Essentially, what he was accused of doing was slowing down too aggressively on the safety car restart, and Max Verstappen, because of that, had to take avoiding action and go around the outside of him. He briefly overtook him because of that as well. And the stewards just kind of decided that that was going to be a 10-second penalty that he took during his pit stop, and then Norris overtook him there. Was the penalty fair? What's your kind of take on this?
I think it's a hard one, George. We have to look at this incident from the stewards' angle. They said that he braked particularly hard, perhaps reducing the speed of that McLaren from 218 kilometers per hour to around 52, 54 kilometers per hour. And in his defense, Oscar Piastri has said that the timing of his slamming on the brakes was perhaps coincidental with the safety car bowing out of the race at that particular point in time. So he can't be blamed for that. I mean, that's the defense that he's put. But ultimately, we have to realize that it did impact Max Verstappen's relaunch at that critical juncture of the race. So definitely there was one driver who did eventually suffer at the behest of the driver leading the pack out in front. These incidents happen, and because somebody at the back was affected, did the penalty actually come into effect? If everything would have been fine, then of course we would not have seen such a dramatic incident panning out. But I think there has been a furor, especially because it definitely compromised Oscar Piastri's race, because this was his Grand Prix win for the taking. It took him around 7.5 laps to take back the control of the race, which eventually, even if belongs to Max Verstappen at the start, was always his for the taking, because on race pace, clearly Red Bull are nowhere close to McLaren's brilliant speeds that we've seen in the all along the season, actually. So I think a harsh one on Oscar Piastri, but dude, you braked and you braked hard. So I mean that's the way the sport flows. It's Formula One, it ebbs and flows, and sometimes you have a win and sometimes you make what you would call is a catastrophic mistake. And at this juncture, because it clearly gives back the advantage that he had been taking out of his teammate back to his teammate, and now we have really a close two-way fight. And I think in the larger scheme of things, now the world championship fight is between the two McLarens, because when Max Verstappen was putting in those brilliant ballsy performances, it clearly had opened up a bit the championship fight, that is, and it became a three-way street. Now it's back to being a two-way street. But as much as you feel bad for Oscar Piastri, and I definitely do because I really admire his racecraft, you have to serve the penalty. So I mean that's what it is. It's very clear. There's nothing that he could have done at that point in time. I mean, he said very openly in his defense that, really, I did put the brakes at the time when, coincidentally, it happened at the time when the safety car was out of the race. So it's a tough one, but it's what's happened, and that's all we can say about it.
Yeah, I must admit, I mean, they showed a comparison between, because Piastri's defense was basically saying that, look, I did the same thing on the previous lap, but they showed the comparison on the Sky Sports coverage, Anthony Davison showing the comparison between the restart and also a lap before, and he did slow down the lap before, but nowhere near as harshly. So it's harsh, but I understand why they gave him a penalty. But Owain was 10 seconds right for this one. We've never. I mean, obviously, George Russell was investigated for Canada. What happened at the end of there? Nothing came of it, of course. But I can't recall there being a penalty for this for a safety car restart. We normally get one where, there's some kind of, 10 over 10 car lengths or, someone breaking the delta time under safety car. Those are quite common ones. But I can't recall anybody getting a penalty like this before for going too slowly and slowing down too much at the restart.
Yeah, I mean, I can't either. I think it comes down maybe to the fact that this is sort of, it was seen as particularly egregious. I mean, I think 60G is the, or six, sorry, 60 PSI, sorry, is it was the number quoted, which is a fair amount of force. Obviously, it's not the full amount of force that you'd use to slow down an F1 car going into a big braking zone, but it's still pretty hefty. And decelerating 100 miles an hour, very, very quickly. I do feel for Oscar Piastri on that one, but I do think that we're sort of in an era where the stewards have sort of stepped up the penalties themselves. So I think that 10 seconds is becoming the new norm. I think it, as much as it seems harsh, yes, it seems harsh here, but that's because we've not necessarily seen it before, and it's always going to feel harsh when it seems to be a bit of a step change in the severity of the penalty that is being applied. On the other side of that, I think that this is a harsh enough penalty, sorry, that it does act as a big deterrent, because as the leading car in a safety car train, and admittedly it did come very late, and I think McLaren is still appealing or going through the motions and seeing what they can do to overturn this penalty. Obviously, Norris won't be happy about that, but Oscar's side of the garage have to do what they have to do. And from that perspective, I think like I say, it's a bit hard. It's a bit hard done by, because it's it's in a difficult position. You could say that it was Paul. The safety car lights did come out a bit late, but if we're just going by the penalty itself, assuming it isn't late, I think that like we say, it was quite a severe deceleration, and because of that, we're seeing quite severe penalties, and they are surely going to deter people from doing this similarly. That said, there is also the side of it where I think drivers are also going to potentially, if you're Piastri doing that again, and a similar situation happens, you'll be like, okay, right, well, I'm just going to keep going at the same speed I'm going to go, and really close up to that safety car. And if you're a vindictive person, maybe they'll sort of take that as well. You've made your bed on this one, but I think it is sort of just a case that 10 seconds is the new normal, and that is serving as a much bigger deterrent, even if it feels harsh at the time. I think that should raise the standard of racing higher.
Yeah, it seems harsh, but we don't really have a kind of test case to kind of compare it to, really. So yeah, he'll be fuming at that, because if it was a 5 second penalty, he would have been neck and neck with Lando Norris in the closing stages. I mean, he served a 10 second penalty, but he was only 5 seconds or so behind after Lando Norris did his stop. So it would have been a thrilling last few laps if that actually happened. But because of that, Ruby, I think that potentially Max Verstappen was very much put off by that. He was the guy obviously behind Piastri at that restart, and he spun around. Now, they said that they were doing a low downforce setup to try and help for the race. It was going to compromise them in qualifying. Verstappen still did a sensational pole lap though on Saturday, and unfortunately, despite setting the wing angles to be better for the race, it ended up hurting them quite a bit, because I think a lack of rear downforce really killed him, for lack of a better term, going through that corner. But despite that, despite going down to probably about 12th or so, he managed to get up to P5 by the end. But I don't think he's going to be very happy about today, Verstappen.
Yeah, one to forget, I think, for Max Verstappen, one to forget for Red Bull. It did look at a time like they might have two consecutive races with no drivers finishing in the points, which after the streak that they managed to stack up, prior to Austria, would have been unthinkable, I think. Like, looking at 2023, for example, where they finished pretty much every single race apart from one or two in first position. But, yeah, they went down a very aggressive, downforce package this weekend. They started off the weekend once again seemingly nowhere. Friday was abysmal for the Red Bull team, but once again the team of Milton Keynes knowing exactly what they need to do to bring their car's performance back up to the peak. And yeah, a fantastic pole lap on Saturday. Very Hamilton, Singapore 2018, 2019, I want to say. Like, in the sense that it's just the perfect lap at the perfect opportunity. But, the rain that came today just was not what Red Bull and their, decisions leading up to Sunday needed ultimately. It cost him. He had no grip going through corners, but crucially more grip than Alex Albon at one point, I will say, when he made that overtake after, pit boxing for some fresh inters. But, Max Verstappen, he'll want to move on. Obviously, there is that question around performance clauses and stuff in contracts, and we can't not mention the fact that that's been a story dominating the news going into this weekend. But at the same time, Spa next weekend, Spa the next race weekend that's coming up, not the next weekend, of course. But, better for Max Verstappen than Red Bull, and once again, Yuki Tsunoda just absolutely nowhere in a race weekend that, Red Bull have been really strong at in previous years.
Yeah, nowhere near as strong this weekend though. Sonoda all the way down in 15th, also known unfortunately as last. He had an absolute shocker. He really even got a penalty partway through for causing a collision. He had an awful, awful day. It could have been easily an awful one for Max Verstappen, but he still manages to get P5 out of it in the end. But that opened up the door. That provided an opportunity for someone who doesn't normally get a podium to get a podium. Who was it? None other than Nico Hulkenberg finally managed to put that one to bed. The man with the longest streak in Formula One history. Not only without a podium, but also without a win as well. The scale of which, the time of which he's spent in Formula One. 15 years he's been waiting for this moment. He's come close on so many occasions. He was leading in Brazil in 2012, crashed out. He could have got a podium Azerbaijan 2017, crashed out. Hockenheim 2019, crashed out. Pole position in Brazil 2010, didn't have the pace in the race. But he did it today, Dev. He did it in arguably the worst car he's ever driven in Formula One. This is an absolutely sensational result, but it's fully deserved for someone who has been waiting a decade and a half for this moment.
Yes, George, and I think it is really a victory for motorsport in a way. The sport always needs such inspiring and gritty stories. And Nico Hulkenberg, besides being a thorough gent, has been such a committed Formula One driver all these years. He's been here, he's been out of Formula One, he came back. I mean, he's kind of a legend in his own way, I would say, because if you just cast your mind rather, on his maiden season, which was in 2010. Who was his teammate? It was Rubens Barrichello. So he's been part of Formula One folklore for such a long time. And as a matter of fact, there was never a doubt about his talent, capability, and willingness to succeed. It took him three Formula One races to score his maiden points. That was in Malaysia. And in that opening season itself in 2010, he scored his best ever race result, which came at the Hungaroring in the form of a P6. I still remember Mark Webber winning that rather brilliant race, and I think Schumacher and Barrichello really going hard at each other at that point in time. But Nico Hulkenberg has always deserved this sensational moment. But for it to come after so many years, in waiting, just reminds me of the Stella Artois beer ad that good things come to those who wait. But I would say it comes to those who wait. He's been what, like a monk all these years, right? I mean, as you rightly pointed out, he's had so many close-ins with that top three slot, especially a P3, but it was always coming and going. So that big moment of reckoning never really happened. Now, if you actually cast your mind onto other charismatic drivers who've driven such brilliant performances, for example, Lewis Hamilton winning in 2021 at Sao Paulo, his racing idol, Ayrton Senna's territory, that mega when he came from far back. He actually started the race from the pit lane, if I remember correctly. Kimi Raikkonen won at Suzuka many moons ago from P17. But again, you have to remember these drivers had formidable machinery under them, right? Kimi had a ballsy McLaren in that era. Lewis Hamilton, arguably speaking, had the best ever Mercedes in the years 2018, 19, 2021. It was no slouch either. Then to have got a P3, from 19th, and then to bring it to P3, but in a kick Sauber, albeit powered by a Ferrari, and then to beat a charismatic Ferrari driver in the form of Sir Lewis Hamilton at Sir Lewis Hamilton's home racing event is, I think, a magnanimous achievement and truly well deserved.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's Sauber's first podium since Kamui Kobayashi. Remember him? Japan 2012, the only podium of his career, the only podium of Hulk's career as well. And it's massive for Sauber in the constructors. Everybody was saying these guys are going to be backmarkers. They've got no chance. If they get ninth, it's a miracle. They're in sixth. They are 18 points behind Williams in fifth. They couldn't, could they? If they managed to hold on to this, it'd genuinely be one of the biggest surprises we've seen in the constructors for a good while. Incredible stuff, really. Incredible. For me, 5-star race without a doubt. And I hope you guys are enjoying this podcast. And if you are, leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify as well, guys. We really appreciate all the support on there. And let us know your thoughts on the race as well. Anywhere you can find the @ symbol at Grid Talk UK for that. But yeah, Dev mentioned Hamilton there, Owain. Unfortunately, his podium streak has come to an end for the first time since 2013. He is not on the podium at Silverstone. He had his chances, he had his opportunities. It could have been a worse day for him, in fairness, when the rain really started to come down. The Ferrari, frankly, looks awful in both Charles Leclerc's and Hamilton's hands. I mean, Leclerc had an awful day, down in 14th in the end for him. But Hamilton bringing home P4, it's a good result in the circumstances, given that the Mercedes guys and the Red Bull guys were behind him. But yeah, so close yet so far from, unfortunately, today.
Yeah, it was a bit unfortunate. I think that maybe they missed an opportunity pitting Lewis just a lap maybe later than they would have needed to, or not taking the chance early in the race in that sort of brief period of dry running that some teams were able to exploit. Yeah, they were a bit late to that. Not sorry, they didn't make use of that, and they were a bit late to it when they did pit him when the rain really came down in that middle sort of in the middle stint. I think that sort of slowed them down a bit. It made things difficult for them at least. But you're right, the car just did not look in some of the conditions to be playing ball whatsoever. Obviously, he was vulnerable to Russell. Russell was all over him in the early stages. And even though that Russell had made that gamble coming in off the formation lap, the pace obviously was such that he could just catch up to Hamilton at that point. I think it's really Hamilton's racecraft that has saved the day a bit here. The fact that he was able to go round the outside of, I believe it was definitely Russell and I think, was it Ocon at the time? Going into Village, really sort of pushing that car to its limits. And I think we did see sort of evidence that, Lewis was also, he really was pushing the car a bit more than maybe he was. Like when you see the cars go off, going into a bit of a rain shower, that's because they're pushing it right to the limit. And we haven't seen that maybe earlier in the season. So it's a bit promising, I think, the fact that Hamilton was able to sort of, deal with the car. He said it was snappy, but he was dealing with it. And that's it wasn't, so that's clearly, I think, evidence that there is progress at Ferrari and that he's learning the car, learning how to get better with it, how to get the mechanics to be able to set it up better for him to the point that he can handle it. And it was just unfortunate that by going to that soft strategy, those used softs, I think, rather than the mediums, yes, they paid dividends early in the stint. He was really running down Hulkenberg, but unfortunately, there was just the issue that they really did seem to sort of cook as the temperatures rose a little bit, and obviously ran out of tyre performance, even in that late stage of the Grand Prix. And to be honest with you, I'm not entirely sure whether mediums would have helped. I can't remember if he had a set of new mediums. I believe he might have done, but obviously that puts you in the same place as Hulkenberg when it comes to tyre deg. So you're looking at lap time speed, and as much as the Ferrari is faster in a straight line, clearly a bit more efficient than the Sauber is. I just don't think he would have been able to catch up, given that. So a difficult day. I think he's made the best of it with what he has, but I think there's just a few tweaks that Maranello could have made to just bring him slightly more into contention and just taking a bit more risk, which they sort of took, I think, a little bit too little at the start of the race and a little bit too much at the end with the soft tyres. They really did degrade going into the last few laps.
Yeah, they did, and coming in a lap earlier than what Hulkenberg did was crucial. I mean, that gained Hulk like 5 seconds over Hamilton, and Hamilton was absolutely harassing him before that. He was all over him, but just couldn't get past. Just could not get past. That Ferrari did not look particularly happy in the wet conditions, but a P4 for Hamilton's decent, and like I said, it's better than what Mercedes managed and better than what Red Bull managed. Which at the moment, McLaren are gone. McLaren have. Yeah, they've almost got exactly double the points of Ferrari as things stand, and Ferrari are in second in the constructors. So their target Ferrari has to be to get consolidate that second place really in the constructors. But speaking of constructors championship, Alpine is still bottom despite Gasly getting P6. Ruby, it was a great day for him. He did a really good job. He was challenging Hamilton at points during this race, but because of everybody else around him, aside from Haas, and we'll speak about Haas soon, but everybody else scored big. And again, it's a bit like the Spanish Grand Prix where Gasly got a P8. Because of everybody else scoring, it kind of negates all that. But in his hands, at least, the Alpine looked pretty decent today.
Yeah, lots of fantastic defensive moves from Pierre Gasly, lots of aggressive, overtaking moves as well. Like, they were saying yesterday that Gasly clearly showed that there was some pace in the Alpine, which in 2025 isn't a sentence I thought I'd be saying, to be honest. But, he's managed to do so much better than his teammates done just on a general level, but, at least managed to keep it above second gear. But, just the fact that those other teams have done so well, you know, has not necessarily, it's kind of shown Alpine up a little bit almost. They've gained 8 points from this race, but Sauber have gained 15. Williams, who are obviously much further ahead, have gained 4. Aston Martin had 2 drivers in the points positions, and you know, it's almost unfair, you'd say, for Pierre Gasly, who's doing such a good job in that car, to be getting such a poor reputation through the season. I mean, you could also say at the same time, because of the cars that have, not necessarily finished ahead of Pierre Gasly in this race, maybe Alpine should have been further up, in a cleaner circumstance for them. But, at the same time, they would not be sniffing at a P6, P 8 points in this season when Sauber have just finished on the podium. That could be Alpine. All these points are going to stack up, and they won't sniff at those 8 points that they've got today, I don't think.
No, it's not a bad result in itself. It's just a weird timing of it. They've almost doubled the points today. They're on 19 now. They were on 11 before. They scored 8 today. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see as well if there's a driver change there. The rumours of Valtteri Bottas are getting in that car, and even Paul Aaron, of course, was in FP1 this weekend for Sauber. He's an Alpine Junior too. There is every chance that could change, but we'll have to see. It's a 3 week gap now. We'll see what happens with that. But let's talk about the true home team. I mean, there's a bunch of teams that are home teams effectively in this one, but the true home team of this race has to be Aston Martin. They are based in Silverstone itself. And it was a good day for them in truth. I mean, Lance Stroll was running in the podium position for a long time, just kind of fell away at the end, unfortunately for him, was in P7. Alonso, a couple points for him in P9. He was not a happy bunny during this race, though, Dev. I mean, he was criticising the team's strategy and everything. Still gets a couple points on the board, but yeah, very, very frustrated on the radio, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really a great race from Fernando Alonso perspective. But yeah, I mean, I would be cautious about criticizing him too much because as far as the last 3 or 4 races are concerned, especially from the point of view of the Spanish Grand Prix, he sort of lifted his racecraft a bit, and he's shown us the signs of being the fighter that he usually is. He got a P9 at Spain, and at Canada, it was I think it's still his best performance. A P7, he picked up 6 points there. At Austria, I think he mirrored the performance at Canada. He got another P7. And then just today, but you have to also understand that he really hasn't got the hang of the car as well as possibly Lance Stroll, who, in comparison to Alonso being this giant, has performed rather admirably well, because last year, at the end of the 2024 World Championship, Lance Stroll had got 24 points. This year he's already scored 20. So he's scoring in patches. There are these lean patches for Lance Stroll, but he seems to be the better of the two drivers in terms of having got the hang of this year's car. And but the way Alonso is, and being the fighter and the irrepressible driver that he might as well actually carry Aston Martin for the rest of the season on his shoulders in a way that Alex Albon has done, the other British constructor, Williams. And it could actually be a very enticing competition between the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso to, for example, the Alex Albon driven Williams, because even though Williams seem to be the pacier of the two cars, and they are on most Sundays and maybe even Saturdays, Fernando Alonso cannot be taken lightly. And he has in Lance Stroll a person who's been scoring points for quite a few races, even before he opened his account, which was not before Spain. So, yeah, but otherwise, a day to forget. There was nothing really special for Fernando Alonso, and he whines a bit too much, doesn't he, now that he's getting old?
He might be getting old, but that's definitely not something new for him. We know what Fernando's antics are like on the radio. He's just a passionate driver, and he just wants to get the best. But saying that they always get the strategy wrong for him and they get it right for Stroll, I mean, that's not going to help. That's not going to help endear you to the team. But that's Fernando Alonso. But yeah, not the best day for Aston Martin, but absolute shocker for Haas today, Owain. He was saying that Potentially, they could be the team to challenge Williams for fifth. If anyone's likely to do it, it's them. They've slid all the way from sixth to ninth in the Constructors' Championship. The only team not to score today. It was an awful one for them. Behrman did a good job in qualifying yesterday, but he got a 10th place penalty for. I still can't believe what he did. He went into the pit lane at 150 miles an hour because of his crash. Got a 10th place penalty for that, under red flags as well, no less. Started down in P18. Ocon, he had contact earlier on, got damage from that. And then to top it all off, just when we thought Ocon was a changed man, we thought he'd turned over a new leaf. He's more experienced now. He's not going to do it again, is he? He took out his teammate again. I swear this is like the fifth teammate he's done it to in F1. An absolute awful one for Haas today.
I'm just telling you, rear lefts look damn tasty to him. Heading into Brooklands of all, to be honest with you, it reminded me sort of oh God, a long, long time ago. Probably 17 or 18 years ago. It was synchronized spinning between the Haas. Yeah, honestly, I'm just saying the Haas pair doing synchronized swimming should be something that synchronized spinning and swimming, given the conditions, is something that we should be talking about in the Olympics, not Formula One. Absolutely, cardinal rule: don't hit your teammate. The fact I shouldn't be seeing car 87 incident with car 31. I shouldn't be seeing that in the decision documents right now, but I am, unfortunately. It's been a poor weekend for Haas, as you say. I mean, at one point there was a small point where they were on the verge of points, and I think there was another time as well where Behrman was sitting in seventh. This could have been a much, much better weekend, but unfortunately, just due to slightly poor strategy, I think, and they've got cycled backwards and then obviously, yeah, to add insult to injury, just taking themselves out of contention in a race where it's one of these things. It seems so silly, but I think maybe where Stroll has succeeded a little bit is because he's not over pushing the car and he's not going for everything. And yes, we sometimes we have taken the mick a lot of Lance Stroll, but the fact is he wasn't doing the stupid stuff. I mean, it's the only thing you can do when you haven't necessarily got the fastest car, because we both know, well, we all know, sorry, that the Behrman and Ocon have talent in spades, and that their car just isn't where they need it to be right now. And they have got some good results out of it. There was the fact that they were sitting in sixth says enough, but they've swapped with the Sauber purely because they didn't execute today cleanly in any way. You don't. Maybe there's an argument to be said that they weren't getting points anyway, so it's not so bad. But when things come back to, this is so tight that as a field that it's going to come down to countback, and the fact that they're both sitting in, they've finished in what 11th and 13th, I think belies how bad the situation was. They could have been doing better. That could have been easier, and they've made it difficult, or at least Ocon's made it difficult. Yeah, it's a weekend to forget, and it's something that they need to be cutting out because the other teams clearly aren't, and that is what is pushing them downwards. And it's just making what is such a closely fought field so much more difficult to get through. 7 points, and they can. Well, sorry, 8 points, and they can overtake the Racing Bulls and the Aston Martin, and it's not so many to kick Sauber. But conversely, that's why they're down there. So you've got to clean this sort of stuff up. I know it's a cliche, but when everyone else is losing, when everyone else is losing their head, you don't want to lose yours, and that's what they've done today, or at least Ocon has, and it's really caused them a big issue.
Yeah, they need some points and they need them soon, unfortunately. And there's not going to be any development really for most of the teams for the rest of this season. So they're kind of stuck with the car they got, and it unfortunately looks a bit mid, for lack of a better term. Right now, it does not look great, but hey, you never know. They could pull off some miracle of a strategy. We got Hungary coming up in a couple of rounds, and they did that a couple of years ago. So we'll see what happens there. But let's give our driver of the day out today. I think this may be fairly unanimous, but we'll see how we go. Ruby, who was your standout Silverstone performer today?
It was definitely Liam Lost. No, it was Nico Hulkenberg. I think no one really could have predicted that 238, race streak of not getting on the podium would have been upturned. He started in P19 for goodness sake, and he's finished P3. And really, I don't have a lot of notes on him until he ends up in that position. So, I wasn't really sure as to whether it was because of, not pitting or something like that. But fundamentally, Nico Hulkenberg could have fallen back down the order whilst he was chasing Lance Stroll. Nico Hulkenberg could have buckled under the pressure of Lewis Hamilton chasing him down at his home Grand Prix, chasing that consecutive podium. Almost an irony there. The driver who has struggled to get a podium his entire career through some fault of his own, through some fault completely not his own, is being chased down by a driver who has scored a podium at every British Grand Prix since 2014. It would have been so easy for him to lose his head, and he's not done that. He's kept a clear head, even when Lewis Hamilton boxed to undercut him, and granted, Lewis went off and lost a lot of time on cold tyres and stuff, but there would have been so many opportunities for Nico to lose it, and he hasn't done that. So I feel like, you can't take that away from him. He has been the best driver on the Silverstone circuit today, outside of maybe Bernd Mailander, but that's another story.
Yeah, well, Burned definitely clocked up a few more laps led today for sure. I mean, for me, yeah, it's an absolute slam dunk. It has to be Nico Hulkenberg going from 19th to third in the worst car on the grid. That's the kind of result. If you did that in the F1 game, you turn the difficulty up after because it's a bit too easy. But he managed it IRL, as we say. Dev, who's your pick for driver of the day today?
Nico, nobody else. He owned the stage. He did pretty well. Remarkable stuff. Somebody who won Le Mans back in 2015, but after that had to wait for a decade more to actually grab his first Formula One podium. 13 years, 16 years in waiting to 39 Grand Prix efforts. So many heartbreaks. Always kept up with what was expected of him. Consistent, reliable, and today just a reward of great patience. Patience has its reward, they say, and today we found out.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been waiting for a long, long time, and nobody would have seen this. Even after he got fifth in Spain, nobody saw this coming. Owain, are you going to make it a full house?
I want to say that I called it halfway through the race, I'll be honest. When he was running in fifth. Yeah, he got to that position by not running and, not going off the track. It's such a simple thing to do, but yeah, it was, difficult conditions, and it's just a result of Sauber making the right calls at the right time, not putting him in difficult positions, not jumping too early, letting Fernando Alonso be the guinea pig. But from that point onwards, yeah, he got there. I think, he kind of cycled himself to the front just through just a kind of chaotic first lap and not pitting when the others did, and manage. It's got to be an amount of tire management as well. We saw how Verstappen, leading out front, having all the clear air in the world, and I think maybe as a result of the lower downforce, absolutely cooking his tires. And Nico Hulkenberg didn't do that, and that's another thing that helps, is that you just got to nurse the car through the difficult periods, and take the opportunities when when the rope sort of metaphorically swings your way, and you got to jump on it and grab it with both hands. And yeah, Sauber did an absolutely brilliant job, but he did a great job to allow them to execute that strategy. And obviously, you can't give it to anyone else, I don't think. As much as Norris did a great job, but and it's always great for him to win his own race. But Nico Hulkenberg did. It feels like I can't believe it's just a podium, but it feels like his career's been leading up to this. And we never know. Maybe some even better. Maybe the even better days are to come. But the fact is that he's always put in the work. I think that's the ultimate takeaway here, is that Sauber and Nico Hulkenberg always put in the work, and it's come to fruition today.
Yeah, massively overdue. And of course, they become Audi next year. There'll be a works Audi team. So the only way it could potentially be up. It really could be. This could be the start of something special for Hulkenberg in what has to be the latter years of his career. But as Fernando Alonso has shown, you can race competitively in F1 well past your 40s. So why the hell not? But yeah, I want to thank my panelists for joining me on the show today. Ruby, if people want to see and hear more from you, where can they go?
They can find me on social media at Ruby Rose Price on Instagram and Threads, and at Rubes on Blue Sky.
Thank you very much. Dev, people want to see more from you, where can they head?
I haven't really been writing a lot as I used to, but I guess I'm just sticking up with some Instagram content on Cairo Sports Official on Formula One and cricket. And yeah, there's Correct Point is there for cricket content. So correctpoint.com and Cairo Sports.
Absolutely. Owain, I gave a little mention to the socials before, but if you want to go over them again?
I would love to, but the only way that you can find our social, oh, sorry, find the more interesting thing on our socials, which is our prediction challenge. Which I'll be honest with you, I feel for Louis having to go through today and figure everything out. I think they're a little bit nicer than maybe than they have been in the past when it comes to on track overtakes, for example. But yeah, if you want to see what the standings play out as and see how hilariously wrong some of us got our predictions, I'm looking at me with a pole for Hamilton and a win for Hamilton as well. Then you have to go to Grid Talk UK on all the social media platforms with the app, and that's where you'll be able to see how everything played out for us. Has anyone increased their lead, or have I fallen even further behind? That's at Grid Talk UK on all the social media platforms with the app.
Yeah, and that should be published by the time this podcast is. So yeah, all of our dirty laundry, as it were, it's going to be hung out to dry. We'll see how we've all done in that one. I don't think I've done too good personally, but we'll find out. And yeah, if you want to see more from me, you can head over to Formula Reports. I got plenty of opinions on the world of Formula One. Got a few videos that should be out by the time this podcast is as well, going over some of the controversial incidents and giving my take on them as usual. But yeah, Grid Talk is available on YouTube as well as Amazon Fire, Spotify, Apple Music, Verbal, and Pocket Cast. Just search for F1 Grid Talk for our big back catalogue of shows with plenty of previews and reactions to the race results. Thank you to Jared, Bradley, and Holly Eagle for supporting us on Patreon. If you want to support the show further, why not sign up to our Patreon for exclusive content, including Beyond the Grid Talk as well. We had a little episode with me, Owain, and Ruby going over the F1 movie and giving our thoughts on how realistic it was, how entertaining it was. You can check it out all on there if you become a member. And also be sure to subscribe to be the first to know when the new weekly episodes get released. We'll be doing our mid-season driver grades in this little gap now as we've gone past the 12th round of 24 this season. And yeah, those will be out very soon. And yeah, thanks for listening to the Grid Talk podcast, everybody. See you soon.